staring out on a night so dark that only my own reflection is visible, projecting my thoughts on the window pane like a movie theater. Why did Eidos Interactive pull the plug on Total Overdose 2, leaving Deadline Games gasping for air like that chick at the start of Jaws? Maybe the game was too pure for this industry, now polluted by titty streamers and video games using predatory gambling techniques to sell loot boxes to children. Degenerates. Now all I'm left with is this episodic beat-em-up with my own face slapped on it to cash in on a movie that bombed so hard it made the fat man look like a firework. Fuck my life.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Games in the Attic. Now last episode I talked about Total Overdose and how I was pissed off that its sequel got cancelled, with Watchmen, The End is Nigh being the last game that Deadline Games would ever release. So how bad was it? Let's find out.
First off, the game was originally released in 2 downloadable installments on Windows, PlayStation Network and Xbox Live, with Part 1 releasing in March 2009 and Part 2 a few months later in July, with a physical edition containing both episodes a month after that, with exclusive collectible art. Wow, exclusive. Published by Warner Bros. Interactive, the games were supposed to ride the hype of the 2009 movie, which, despite a strong opening weekend, fell straight off a cliff. Part 1 starts out with a comic book style cutscene introducing Night and Rorschach.
Can't believe you read this rag. Pure liberal drivel, all of it.
Absolutely. I mean, how could they only give Turtles in Time a 63%? Pure liberal drivel.
So pick who you want to be and start the game. Part 1 story has Night and Rorschach responding to a prison riot where Anthony Rizzoli, otherwise known as Underboss, has escaped. You then proceed to kick the shit out of everyone you see in order to find out what Underboss is planning and to put a stop to it. The story isn't really important and is only there to provide a reason for us gamers to take control of a superhero and go and fuck up some baddies, which is all you do in this game. Besides the parts where Night and Rorschach take alternate routes and meet up a minute or two later, you're beating people up, that's it. Now, if you haven't been living under a rock the last 12 years, you might be saying to yourself, hey, this looks exactly like Arkham Asylum. Well, it doesn't just look like Arkham Asylum, it plays like it too. And with Warner Interactive publishing both games, there has to have been some crosstalk between Rocksteady and Deadline Games somewhere. Maybe Deadline, given the short amount of time they had, cobbled together what they could using the pieces Rocksteady threw them. Or maybe they had a small part in creating the greatest third-person fighting mechanics gaming has ever seen. Who knows? While Watchmen's fighting isn't anywhere near as fluid as Arkham's and is missing the combo counter and instant takedowns amongst other things, it's still very close to what Rocksteady would release 5 months later. And it's still fun enough to keep you playing until the end, which doesn't take long because Part 1 is barely 2 hours, with Part 2 being even shorter than that. In Part 2, Rorschach tells Night Owl about a missing girl. Night Owl manages to clean up the footage and work out where the video was shot. You then proceed to kick the shit out of everyone you see in order to find the missing girl. There's nothing else more to the story, it's just an excuse for you to fucking fuck people up. Yeah, the gameplay's a bit monotonous, but it's still fun, and with both parts combined just about scraping the 4-hour mark, it hardly outstays its welcome. The graphics and animation are great also, and just seem like they've been lifted straight from Arkham Asylum, and for what was originally a download-only experience, this was pretty impressive for 2009. Remember, this is back when having a Netflix subscription meant that they posted you that shit. But what pissed on everyone's chips was the price. 1,600 Microsoft points. Remember those? Episode 1 cost about 20 quid, and Episode 2 about 15, so like 35 quid in all for only 4 hours of gameplay. Then they released the physical edition to rip a bunch of other people off. And that's my only real problem with the game, the price. But now, however, you can pick both episodes up on Steam for like $6.99 or a physical copy for a couple of quid on eBay, which is worth it. Only if it's just to see some obscure Watchmen game that looks and plays just like Arkham Asylum. But if you want to play Episode 1 on PC, keep in mind that there's no controller support, which is weird because Episode 2 does have controller support. So with Episode 1, you can either play on console with a controller or suffer the keyboard and mouse controls for the PC's better performance. I chose the latter. The game's got trashed by critics, with IGN saying that a beat-em-up version of Watchmen is an abominable idea, which is something I don't get. As a gamer, all I care about is the game. I wouldn't care if they made a beat 'em up out of Pippi fucking Longstocking, as long as the game's good. And the Eurogamer reviewer starts complaining about how misogynistic Rorschach is, saying the dialogue features female voices squealing, "I'd call for help, but I think I like it," while Rorschach growls endlessly about filthy whores and making them pay for their indiscretions lends the whole level a truly queasy atmosphere.
And he keeps going on and on about how little in common the game has with its source material. But if this lemon had read the comics, he'd know that my mother was a prostitute that used to beat me. So, you know, maybe that's why I'm such a dick.
Also, I like how he says nothing about beating up a countless number of men. Oh, that's fine, fuck us. So sorry if this game made you feel queasy, heaven forbid. Eurogamer gave part 1 a 3 out of 10 and part 2 a 2 out of 10, which goes a little against the Xbox Live user ratings, which, as you can see, were pretty positive. Is the game outrageously short? Yes. Was it horrendously overpriced? Yes. But if I told you this was some Watchmen DLC from Rocksteady, how many of you would have called bullshit? What's there is decent and totally playable, and I think Deadline Games did all they could with the time they were given. Giving it a 5 out of 10, sure, I'd understand that, but 2s and 3s for a downloadable game that plays a lot like one of the greatest video games of all time, absolute bollocks. It certainly isn't bad enough to be the game that killed its developer, and it's a crying shame that a studio with such big ideas was reduced to nothing more than Warner Brothers' lackey, forced to do their bidding because they had a Watchmen movie coming out and they wanted to make a quick buck off of gamers. Total Overdose 2 looked like it could have been so amazing. The concept art looked brilliant, and there is no doubt in my mind it would have been a good game, maybe even a great one. But Deadline Games went under only a few months after Watchmen released. So as Deadline fell, Rocksteady shot its back claw right into our hearts and video game history with Arkham Asylum, one of my favourite games of all time, and is one of the few games I'll 100% over and over again. But was Rocksteady always destined for greatness? Tune in next time where I'll be looking into the first game they ever made. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Games in the Attic.